Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, occasionally things happen when you're in Congress that make you so angry that you can't hardly stand it. I got a call this week, Mr. Speaker, this past week from a friend of mine from my childhood. And her brother was a veteran who was in the Veterans Hospital, and he was assigned to a community residential care program. That's where they put one of these veterans into a home in a neighborhood with other veterans, and they're supposed to be cared for. She told me that the place where he was being kept was not clean, that the window the room he was in had a window that was sealed shut, that he took oxygen. There was no signs or anything that dealt with the oxygen that he was taking. A dog in the house came in to his room and chewed through his oxygen cord tube, and he had to keep his door shut, so it virtually made him a prisoner in this house. There were 4 veterans in this house, and the attitude of the person who ran this home was not anything that you would call conducive to good care. And the 2 sisters of his were very, very upset, and they thought that he shouldn't be kept in this place, and they asked me if I'd check into it. So I called the caseworker, a lady named Pat Earp, and she told me that everything out there was fine. And I said I wanted to see for myself. So I went out to the house, and by the time I had arrived, they had contacted the woman who owned the house, and she was very hostile and said she wouldn't allow me, even though I was a member of Congress, to take a look at the circumstances under which Mr. English was living. That's my buddy from childhood, Paul English. So I didn't want to press the case, so I called the director of the Rowderbush Hospital in Indianapolis. He wasn't in, but I did get his assistant director, who was very nice, and he agreed to have somebody come out there and take a look at the situation. He came out with 2 ladies who were nurses there, and my childhood friend went into the house with them to try to get his clothes and everything out of there so they could take him to her house until they found another place for him to be kept. They were hostile. The 2 nurses from the Rowderbush Hospital were hostile. They evidently changed the cord on his oxygen facility or equipment, and they said that nothing like that happened. And yet his sisters saw that it happened, and they were very upset. The room and the house was not clean. He had 2 towels in his room, both of which had holes in them, obviously older. And on the weekends, the caseworker said that the woman who took care of these veterans who were in her care would leave for the weekend and left a pot of food on the stove. This isn't the way that our veterans ought to be taken care of when they're in the community residential care program. So I decided to pursue it further, and I got a call today, and I returned the call of a lady named Phyllis Beeman, who's the head of the Extended Care Unit Manager at the Indianapolis Veterans Affairs Medical Center, the Rowderbush Hospital, today. And she indicated that everything was fine, and they'd used this house and this caregiver for the past, well, since 1983. And I could only imagine what other veterans had to live with who lived in this house since 1983 and was given this kind of quote-unquote care. I can't tell you how this affected me. I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee for 10 years, and I had heard stories like this before, but I always felt like that the veterans were getting the quality of care that we were paying for as taxpayers, and they were being taken care of. And yet my friend from my childhood was being mistreated, in my opinion, and his sister finally got him out of there and took him to her house, and the day after she took him to her house, because of the stress he was under, he had a heart attack. And he went to the hospital, and they put 2 stents in him, and he did survive. But I think that, and don't misunderstand, Mr. Speaker, I think the people that serve in our veterans hospitals, for the most part, do an outstanding job. The nurses and the doctors who serve our veterans do a good job. But there are occasions when the care is not just less than adequate, it's almost criminally inadequate. And this is one of the cases that really bothers me. And I'm going to call for a complete investigation of the community residential care program and the people who provide it at the Indianapolis Rowderbush Hospital. Not because I don't think most of the people who work at the hospital do a good job, because I think they do. But I think there's a dereliction of responsibility in this community residential care program that needs to be corrected. And it needs to be corrected very, very quickly. We shouldn't have a veteran in a room in a house with the windows sealed so he can't get out in the event of emergency. We shouldn't have him taking oxygen with a dog that's going to come in the room and chew on his oxygen tube. We shouldn't have people that are leaving the premises unattended with 4 veterans in there on a weekend and telling their relatives, well, you ought to take him someplace else because there won't be anybody here. And if they are here, they leave the food on the stove so they can get their own food. And these people, many of them are mentally challenged, like my friend is. He's had some psychological problems. Well, let me just say in closing, Mr. Speaker, this is something that needs to be addressed. There needs to be an investigation of the community residential care program in Indianapolis. And if it's like this in other parts of the country, we need to have a national investigation. I yield back my time.
Mr. Cummings from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker,